Hello, I'm Colonel Mo Davis, and I'm a retired Air Force officer and attorney. From 2005 to 2007, I was the chief prosecutor for the military commissions at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I felt compelled to speak up because of Dan Coates' recent attack ad, an ad that I believe is dishonest and hypocritical, and I believe I'm being charitable using those terms. As someone who spent a quarter century in uniform serving our country, there are two things I can't stand: terrorists and hypocrites. The facts are clear. Shortly after Dan Coates parlayed his Capitol Hill experience into a high-paying job as a lobbyist, his firm, Werner Liebfert, took on the Republic of Yemen as a client. Yemen has been and remains on the radar because of its role as a safe haven and training ground for Al-Qaeda. It's been called the next Afghanistan and remains one of the most urgent threats to U.S. national security interests. And despite all this, as he pocketed a lavish salary at Werner Liebfert, I never once heard Dan Coates voice any objections. For a former senator to sit back, pocket the money, and not say a word suggests to me a man who puts personal profit ahead of principle. The same was true at his second firm, King & Spalding, where Dan Coates led one of the firm's major divisions. He says he was on the payroll there just like a janitor. Well, unlike a janitor, he earned millions, over $600,000 a year, as one of the firm's marquee members, and he's consistently defended the firm's entire list of clients. As he said when he joined King & Spalding, quote, "Their reputation, culture, and client base are the right fit for me." King & Spalding had been and continues to represent 6 suspected terrorists in custody at Guantanamo, something it did with much fanfare throughout the time Dan Coates was on the payroll as a senior member of the firm. I know that for a fact because I was the chief prosecutor at Guantanamo for a couple of those years, and I saw their efforts firsthand. To my knowledge, not once in all those years did Dan Coates express any reservations about his firm's involvement on behalf of these suspected terrorists. In January 2009, for example, one of his partners at King & Spalding praised President Obama's plan to close Gitmo, saying, quote, "We need to rid our wonderful country of this black eye." So for Dan Coates to now stand in front of the flag and feign outrage when he's running for office suggests to me that this is someone who's focused more on his own political security than our national security. Not only is this ad hypocritical, it's an attempt to smear the record of Congressman Brad Ellsworth, someone who spent decades serving and protecting the people in his community right here in Indiana, rather than pandering for profit in Washington like Dan Coates. Washington has a history of politicians just like Dan Coates who play these political games, spin whatever tale they need to spin to get elected, and put principles on the back burner. Indiana and America need a principled leader, a genuine public servant like Brad Ellsworth, someone who, like me, got up every morning for a quarter of a century, put on a uniform, and went out to protect and defend his fellow citizens. What Indiana and America don't need is a lobbyist like Dan Coates with a vote in the Senate.